Our talk today is a legend called Air India, an online talk by Piyush Khaitan. Now, soon after its formation in 1948, Air India International embarked on a unique journey, a path that was very different from the other airlines. It was sometimes quirky, it was sometimes irrelevant, and sometimes plain cheeky. And Air India endeared itself to its passengers for the luxury, love, and the high standards of excellence wherever it flew, and was recognized as the finest airline in the world. At this talk today, our researcher and collector Piyush Khaitan will take us on a flight of nostalgia and relive this magical era of Indian aviation through his extensive collection of Air India memorabilia, including posters, photographs, and other artifacts. Piyush is a researcher and collector of Indian civil aviation history and memorabilia. He has the world's largest collection of Air India related items, over 6,000 of them. How exciting! And a large part of this collection is available to view on his website called airindiacollector.com. He's a noted philatelist and was elected Fellow of the Philatelic Congress of India, FPCI, and Fellow of the Royal Philatelic Society, London, FRBC, PSL. He's a winner of the National Champions of Champions Trophy in 2023. We are so delighted to have you here with us today, Piyush.
Thank you, Sasky. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. I am someone who's been a fan of the great history of Air India and has been in awe of the wonderful achievements of this airline. Such greatness was only possible because of the wonderful people who worked for the airline, but also in a large measure due to the inspiring leadership of Mr. J.R.D. Tata, the chairman of the airline. So with this, I will now share my first slide. So I could talk today about the many reasons for the greatness of the airline. And here in the words of Ray Broomfield, convener of the World Advertising Conference London in 1967, really communicate my sentiments perfectly. If any of you have not traveled on this celebrated airline, he said, you should make good this sad oversight at the first opportunity, because it provides an experience which in my opinion is unique. Other airlines may offer you equal luxuries and perhaps equal gastronomic delights. Other airlines may, though I doubt this, provide equally delicious stewardesses, though none I think reveal to you, as do these sari-draped ladies, their exquisite midriffs. But no airline in the world provides such an exquisite feast of wit and entertainment as Air India does in its travel literature. The most boring requirements of immigration, customs, health authorities, and the like are explained to you in the most urbane, tactful, and amusing manner imaginable. All is written in elegant, witty, and fastidiously worded English prose to help you while away your journey. So this is what I want to talk to you about today: the stewardship of Mr. Tata and the creative genius of persons like Bobby Kuka, Jal Kawasji, and many more from the Air India Art Studio and from their agency J. Walter Thompson, now HTA. Right from the early years, Air India had to compete with giants like Pan Am, TWA, BOAC, Air France, Lufthansa, and KLM. These airlines had more planes, more staff, more booking offices. They also had large advertising spends. Having limited budgets, Air India somehow had to find a way to attract attention and to find customers. How was Air India ever going to compete with these giants? So enter the Maharajah. The Maharajah, as a symbol, actually predates the airline. It goes back to 1946, when he was first used by Air India Limited. Air India Limited was formerly called Tata Airlines Limited, the domestic carrier that merged into the newly formed Indian Airlines Corporation upon nationalization in August 1953. So Tata Airlines was started in 1932 by J.R.D. Tata to carry mail from Karachi to Madras via Ahmedabad, Bombay, and Bellary, and was always largely a domestic carrier. They did have flights going into Colombo, and after partition, they were servicing Karachi in Pakistan, but that was pretty much it. So, this is the airline that created the Maharajah symbol in 1946. In fact, he is credited to J. Umesh Rao, who was with the Hindustan J. Walter Thompson agency at that time. The Maharaja went on to become perhaps the greatest brand icon of any enterprise anywhere in the world. There is simply no other example that comes even close to him. In the words of Kuka, we call him our Maharaja for want of a better description, but his blood isn't blue. He may look like royalty, but he isn't royal. There have been times when his pulse beat has caused us concern. Ministers and dignitaries of lesser import have denounced him as a relic of the feudal system, an insignia not in keeping with a corporation, the owners of which are our government. Through my talk, I will endeavor to share some interesting, some spicy anecdotes about the symbol. I will do so by quoting from published material and attributing sources as far as possible. A large amount of information comes from Kuka's speech, A Labor of Love, which he delivered in 1960s. The credit hence for all that you're about to see today goes to many persons who have originally recorded this information. Any mistakes that have crept in are certainly mine. Following tradition, I will refer to city names contemporaneously. So, for example, I will refer to our city as Bombay for events before 1995 and Mumbai for later events. This is going to be a light-hearted and fun interlude, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the Air India story. Now, we have to go back to 1948 when Air India International was born. So, we were already impoverished as a nation by forced contributions to the war effort, and the newly independent nation was dealing with problems caused by the greatest mass migration in history due to the partition. Around this time, Mr. J.R.D. Tata, the founder of Tata Air Services, wrote to Mr. Nehru, our Prime Minister, suggesting that the government of India sponsor an international airline. And as a result, Air India International was born in March 1948. The airline was owned 49% by Government of India, 25% by Tatas, and 26% by other shareholders. So this is a good time for me to just share with you that, there is a myth that Air India belonged to Tatas and the government took it away. That is not true. The fact of the matter is that from day one, Air India International was owned 49% by Government of India, and they had an option to acquire 2% anytime, whenever they wanted. In fact, this was the first successful example of public-private partnership in our country. So moving on, Air India managed to get delivery of 3 Lockheed Constellation L749A aircraft very soon. The formation of Air India International was a source of national pride and celebration, ushering in hope of a new era of modernity and global recognition. A Lockheed Constellation L749 aircraft, the Malabar Princess VTCQP, flew from Bombay to London via Cairo and Geneva on 8th June 1948, marking the birth of the airline. So I have here a Films Division newsreel capturing this historic event that was shown in all cinema halls across the country before each feature film.
हमारे देश का पहला जहाज मालाबार प्रिंसेस इंग्लैंड जाने के लिए तैयार खड़ा है। इस जहाज की कंपनी में भारत सरकार का 49% हिस्सा है। टाटा कंपनी के चेयरमैन श्री J.R.D. टाटा ने इस जहाज के बारे में बताते हुए कहा कि मालाबार प्रिंसेस में 42 मुसाफिर आराम से जा सकते हैं। जहाज में खाने पीने के अलावा मुसाफिरों को पूरा आराम पहुंचाने का इंतजाम भी किया गया है। रात के समय मुसाफिरों के सोने का भी इंतजाम है। कैप्टन गजदर ने इस बात पर खुशी जाहिर की कि उन्हें सबसे पहले अपने देश का जहाज विदेश ले जाने का मौका मिला है। नावानगर के जाम साहब भी इसी जहाज से विलायत जा रहे हैं। प्रसिद्ध फिल्म निर्माता केकी मोदी भी अपनी धर्मपत्नी के साथ इसी जहाज से सफर कर रहे हैं। मिस्टर टाटा और दूसरे मुसाफिर भी जहाज पर सवार हो गए। आज हिंदुस्तान का सबसे पहला जहाज मुसाफिरों को लेकर विदेश जा रहा है। देश की शुभकामनाएं उसके साथ हैं।
So this is some rare archival footage we were able to get from the films division, and very kind of them to permit us to use it. Also, there was a unique event in world postal history that happened on 8th of June 1948. The 12 Anna postage stamp was issued to commemorate this flight, and a very unique set of rules defining its usage made this event very special. This never happened before in the world. The stamp depicted the Air India aircraft, and a special cover was designed by the Postal Department and by Air India. These were given free to people who purchased the stamp. Arrangements were also made that any letter addressed to Air India offices in Cairo, Geneva, London would be returned free of cost to the sender so that he could keep it as a souvenir. A special postal cancellation was applied, and about 65,000 such letters were carried on the first flight. And these are even today much sought after by stamp collectors in the country and abroad. The importance given to this flight and to this stamp issue can only be realized when we consider that the father of our nation, Mahatma Gandhi, was assassinated on 30th January the same year. The postage stamp commemorating Gandhiji was released only on 15th August 1948 after a delay of 7 months. While Air India International was formed in March 48 and the stamp was issued in June, just 3 months later. Incidentally, these were the only 2 stamps issued in 1948, and the Air India International stamp was only the second issue by India after independence. So now enter Bobby Kuka. In December 1938, Tata Sons appointed Bobby Kuka as their acting secretary at a salary of rupees 250 per month. His appointment letter states that the post will be confirmed and his salary will be increased to 300 per month upon his demonstrating satisfactory work and ability to hold the post. I cannot imagine what potential Neville Vincent, who signed this letter, saw in Kuka. Over time, Kuka became the airline's commercial manager, responsible, among other things, for advertising. This mad marketing genius used the Maharajah as a brand icon for the airline and built the entire brand of Air India around this delightful character. So this is the original appointment letter, getting him into the Tata. The airline had a penchant for stirring up trouble for itself. This started even before Air India International was born. Here we have a map of 1946. This is the route map of Air India Limited, the domestic airline. It shows various cities in India and people in various cities engaged in traditional activity. I have zoomed in on a small part of this map showing Madras. So here we see a person busy on a typewriter. There was a furor in Delhi in the transitional government. Mr. Tata was called in to explain how could the airline show the great people of Madras as semi-naked typists and clerks. A state that has produced eminent personalities like C. Rajagopalachari, S. Ramanujam and the like. So of course, this map was withdrawn. Little did poor Mr. Tata know that this was only the beginning of a long series of persons and governments across the globe getting offended by the good-humored attempts of the publicity department of the airline. In the old days of seat-occupied cards, you were not allotted fixed seats in those days when you flew. So once you had a seat, if you got up, you would put a card there. So Air India shows this lovely creature sitting happily on our hero's lap, with another lovely looking on irate. The caption was, 1,000 pardons, this seat is occupied. The Minister for Communication saw the card and complained to Mr. Tata that the drawing was against the traditions of Indian womanhood and asked him to withdraw the card. No one bothered to ask dear Indian womanhood how she felt about it. Pre-gummed labels were distributed by the airline to passengers to affix on their luggage and had the names of different destinations, flown by the airline, along with a cartoon of the Maharajah in each of them. The art for each of these was always cheerful and humorous, often a little cheeky. He was the Maharajah, he could get away with a lot. This popular Paris decal has the Maharaja planting a rather gentlemanly kiss on the hand of a pretty Parisian maiden. The same design was also reproduced on the drinks coaster and used well into the 1960s. A lesser known fact is that the airline issued a small quantity of Paris decals in the 1950s with another rather controversial image. This 5.5-inch diameter decal I chanced upon was a design never seen by me before. Here we have a brightly dressed Parisian man, replete with red scarf and green beret, planting a kiss on the cheek of a rather coy-looking Maharaja, giving the expression gay Paris a whole new meaning. I do admire the chutzpah and the courage of his creators to publish a cartoon like this, and that too in the 1950s. With all the debate going on these days, one wonders whether our so-called modern era has a thing or two to learn from the liberal 50s. The same creative and humorous design was used for the beer coasters, used for in-flight drinks service. Over the years, the airline came up with about 300 different designs. Passengers loved them so much, they often took them home as souvenirs. And these Air India beer coasters have become collectible items in their own right. Here we have something I have never seen elsewhere. This passenger took a liking to the beer coaster and used it much as we would use a picture postcard in those days. He put a postage stamp on it, put an airmail label on it, and posted it in Nairobi, addressed to Germany, with a message in German which roughly translates, "We'll see each other again on 31st July 1962. The 1950s were the Lockheed era for the airline, starting with the L749 Constellation, which the airline first bought in 1948, and in 1954 the Super Constellations L1049 were introduced. The Super Constellation provided unparalleled comfort during the 1950s, with the slumberette seating that converted into a bed even on long routes from India to Japan, Europe, Africa, and Australia. The coming of age for Air India, however, was in the early 1960s, when the airline took delivery of its first Boeing 707 aircraft, fitted with Rolls-Royce Conway engines. The sleek design of the aircraft, fitted with all modern amenities, and the high-pitched whine of the engine was distinctive. After this, there was no looking back. The airline clearly established itself as the finest airline in the world and became the first choice for discerning travelers of all nationalities. Some footage of Bombay Airport and the Air India Boeing 707 aircraft was the ultimate representation of glamour that every Bollywood director wanted to ingrain in his films during the 60s and 70s. Every other Bollywood film had to have an airport scene, an aeroplane scene. Without that, they were just not complete. So we have a clip here from a very popular 1970s Bollywood film, Mera Naam Joker, with the legendary Raj Kapoor and Dara Singh at Bombay Airport, featuring the Boeing 707. In February of 1960, on the eve of the first Boeing 707's arrival, Air India displayed a billboard at Kemp's Corner, Bombay. These were the two very iconic sites where Air India would put up their hoardings or billboards, Nariman Point and Kemp's Corner. Nariman Point, of course, came up later. In the 60s, they just had Kemp's Corner, Bombay. They had a permanent and unique position there. You will observe that the Maharajah portrays an expectant woman about to have a newborn. And the caption was, "Can you keep a secret?" A rather annoyed British Deputy High Commissioner in Bombay telephoned the British number one of the advertising agency of Air India, J. Walter Thompson. He complained that the hoarding was in awfully poor taste, as Her Majesty the Queen was expecting a baby at around the same time. So obviously the billboard had to be pulled down.
ये जो V-neck है ना, इसमें आपके पास कॉटन में कुछ नहीं है। अभी हम फैब्रिक में विस्कोस ही है, कॉटन और फिलार है।
Janki, can we mute? Yeah.
Yeah. So Lady Godiva, the Countess of Mercia, was an English noblewoman who, according to legend, dating at least to the 13th century, she rode naked, covered only in her long hair, through the streets of Coventry to gain remission of the oppressive taxation that a husband had imposed on his tenants. She is considered a noble soul for the sacrifice she made for her people and is part of old English folklore. So how could Air India pass up an opportunity to bring back her story with rhyme and panache? So they came up with this hoarding which read, "Were Lady Godiva to ride again, she'd have more sense. She'd take a plane. She'd cut her hair. She'd wear the sack. She'd fly Boeing there and back." Apparently, not all of us had the same sense of humor as the creators of this limerick. Matters got so heated up in the early 1960s, the Speaker of the Lok Sabha announced the allocation of 30 minutes to discuss Air India's publicity in view of the strong feelings in certain quarters. The Minister of Aviation was asked if he had seen the Air India hoarding in Delhi, which showed a naked Indian woman riding a horse bareback. And if so, what the reaction of the minister was. There were sighs of relief when the minister explained that she was not Indian but English, and muted approval when the minister added that she was a woman of good virtue who had agreed to remove her clothes to fulfill a challenge and thus secure a reduction in taxes for her people. But nevertheless, the airline received orders to obliterate Godiva. But the critic in Parliament was not to be silenced. He asked the minister whether it was correct that Air India should portray Indians as thieves. The reference being to a page in Foolishly Yours, which shows a rotund Indian passenger. Foolishly Yours was a small book that was put in the seat pocket of for every passenger to read while they were flying. So this shows a rotund Indian passenger embracing an air hostess. The paragraph was titled "Rendering unto Caesar," and the copy ran, "True to the traditions of Eastern hospitality, thy hostess will embrace thee at a destination. It helps your ego and us to cut our losses. While you're thanking Providence for the heaven in your arms, she's recovering our cutlery from your pockets." The airline had duly received orders to make the Indian passenger un-Indian. They changed his cap, they gave him a bowler, replaced his dhoti with trousers, and there was peace. Foreigners can steal, but we Indians are above all that. Such antics often got Mr. Tata into hot water, both with the government and with the media. It is to his credit that he withstood the attacks. He continued to provide full creative freedom to his team. As we shall see later in the talk, sometimes the freedom of expression went too far and had disastrous consequences. Air India troubles have all not been indigenous. They published a poster which featured a Maharajah dressed as a suspicious-looking Frenchman in a beret, his jacket slyly open, revealing postcards of our Maharajah as himself. And the caption was, "Naughty pictures." It wasn't long before they heard from the Minister of Cultural Affairs, the Louvre, Paris. And this is what he said. "I was badly surprised as a French citizen to see an Air India poster inviting Indians to visit Paris, advertise for nasty pictures, which is not a sympathetic way to represent a country. As if the erotic sculptures of Khajuraho were to represent Indian art." Awaiting your reply. Of course, the poster was an example of the fantastically creative work done by Air India and went on to win several awards, both in India and abroad. As far as the French minister is concerned, Air India replied in the best possible way. They put up this hoarding at Kemp's Corner. Now on to England. A poster they published for London depict row upon row of black-suited, bowler-hatted, heavily overcoated, grim elderly men reading the Times, waiting for an underground rail. It wasn't long before the general manager of the British Travel and Holidays Association wrote to Air India's London office. He writes, our manager in Australia has drawn my attention to a poster published by Air India headed London and depicting a group of bowler-hatted Englishmen standing behind a symbolical figure reading the Times, which paper has a headline, London Smogbound. Apparently, this poster had been distributed in Australia, where it is our interest to attract visitors to Britain at all times of the year. It shows a dull and dismal London. Also, you'll notice clearly at the back of the newspaper that our Maharajah is reading is an Air India advertisement with the Maharajah sunning himself, and its headline, Come to Sunny India. Again, this was a very, very outstanding piece of creativity done by the Air India Art Studio, well recognized, and despite the criticism from the British Holiday Association, went on to win several awards internationally. For the Brussels poster, there could have been so many typical Belgian images, but Air India had chosen Mannequin Pis, the famous statue in Brussels. It wasn't long before the Belgian ambassador to New Delhi wrote to Mr. Tata, more in sorrow than anger, and ended by saying that his cultural attaché was in a position to supply him with other landmarks of his capital. For succor, the airline ran to the Director General of Tourism for Belgium, and Monsieur Hollow wrote to the airline a letter which read, he said, I appreciate very much this kind of humor, and am always pleased to see a little man so symbolic of the Belgian refusal to conformity being integrated to a publicity campaign in favor of Belgium. In this far too serious world in which we live, such humor does a lot of good, and personally, it does not displease me that a bit of frank impertinence is added to the picture one can have of our country. Other members of the public wrote to leading newspapers asking whether Air India's poster on Brussels was desirable. A question was also raised in Parliament. A communist MP asked the Speaker the following, may I know whether it is not a fact that this gentleman Kuka, who is responsible for this advertisement, is much too Western-oriented and decadent bourgeois culture? May I know why this man is not changed? May I know why this man is being kept, and why a person having proper cultural background in the Indian setup and condition is not put there? So again, the hapless Mr. Tata had to face the music. This is the very interesting story of the Dali ashtray. So Rima Ghei had actually published a wonderful account of this in the Mumbai Mirror in August 2017. So I'll just read some excerpts from that article. Air India once upon a time had legends such as the Spanish surrealist Salvador Dali on its roster, with a work that could be traced to the national carrier. The airline commissioned Dali to design an ashtray for it. 1,000 limited edition pieces of this unglazed porcelain ashtray were produced. Jyot Singh, in charge of the publicity and PR cell in Europe, was responsible for asking Dali to create a work of art for Air India. This is the first time that an artist of Dali's stature had designed an object art for the airline, for any airline. Dali presented Air India with a unique design, which he called double image. The magic of India inspired Dali to create this unusual ashtray. The design was in the shape of a round shell with a serpent around its perimeter. It is supported by two surrealist headstands, an elephant on one side and a swan on the other. This unusual piece of art was presented to art lovers and friends of Air India globally. One such piece was also presented to Prince Juan Carlos of Spain, later King of Spain, in 1967. In Dali's own words, the reflection of the elephant appears to be a swan, and the reflection of the swan appears to be an elephant. This is what I have done for the ashtray. Thus, the swan upside down becomes an elephant's head, and the elephant inverted becomes a swan. However, when asked about his remuneration, Dali said, "You can send me an elephant." His partner Gala was sitting beside him, promptly added, "and $10,000. The Air India staff thought he was joking, but he was dead serious. Air India flew this 2-year-old baby elephant from Bangalore, accompanied by a mahout, to Geneva. And this baby elephant, called Big Baby, was brought to Sadak, which is the village where Dali lived. And he was brought there by truck. The bewildered villagers danced around him in celebration. The mayor of the village declared 3 days holiday to celebrate the arrival of the elephant. There was a special parade that was organized at the plaza. A special drink was prepared with wine and Indian tea, and pink champagne, which was Dali's favorite, was served. An Indian astrologer was flown from Bombay to take part in the festivities. Later, of course, the baby elephant was donated by him to Barcelona Zoo. The Boeing 747 jumbo jet joined the Air India fleet in mid-1972. This again cemented the airline's position as among the most modern in the world and gave the airline another shot at creating a differentiated experience and a world-class experience. They decided to give very ethnic decor, costumes, etc. for the flight. They selected the Krishna theme for the interior of the aircraft, and the air hostesses very sportingly played the role of gopis. So a unique feature of this jumbo jet was the upper deck of the aircraft, which was converted into the Maharajah lounge for first-class passengers. No effort was spared in design and decoration. A life-size mock-up of this lounge was made in the Nariman Point headquarters of the airline. Mr. Tata inspected this several times until he was satisfied. So we have here a cartoon drawn by the artist Shetty of the Air India Art Studio. We see Mr. Tata critically examining the lounge, and behind him are his very anxious lieutenants standing there. This was later featured in the booklet This Makes No Sense, which was the successor to Foolishly Yours. So here we can see some of the designs used in the interior panels of the aircraft. You'll notice the Krishna theme has been used very, very creatively in each of these. Air India also produced a 17-minute promotional film, To Serve Is to Love, after taking delivery of the jumbo jet, to showcase the glamour around the airline and air travel. This film was directed by Zafar Hai, won the National Award for Best Film in its category in 1974. It featured 4 air hostesses as actors and shows the journey of the Air India jumbo jet from Bombay to Rome, Paris, London, and New York. The music was composed by, it has virtually no voice or speech at all. It's totally audio. The music was composed by Pandit Ramnarayan, who played the sarangi. His son Pandit Brijnarayan played the sarod, Pandit Hari Prasad Chaurasia played the basuri, and Ustad Zakir Hussain played the tabla. Multiple copies of this film were made for projection at travel and tourism related events and trade shows. Mysteriously, all of them seem to have been lost over time. It is a great stroke of luck for me that I was able to get a pristine copy of this film, salvaged from a fire at the processing studio in Pittsburgh. I'm going to show you a short clip from it. You get an idea of the interiors. Air India also built the largest and finest private collection of art and artifacts in India, and these were by all reputed Indian artists and sculptors. They were used to adorn various offices of Air India in India and abroad. Images of these were used on covers of their in flight menu cards, calendars, diaries, etc. They would also generously fly artists and performers abroad for shows and performances at no cost. It's fair to say that the airline was the cultural ambassador of our nation. From time to time, they would host exhibitions where they would display part of their fabulous collection. Here is a book that was published in 2013 along with their exhibition in NGMA, and a coffee table book published in 2008. So this was followed by exhibitions in Mumbai in 2021 at the Air India building Nariman Point and at the NGMA in 2023. This great art collection now vests with the Government of India and was retained as part of the deal for the sale of the airline to Tatas. The government has yet to announce what they plan to do with this treasure. One hopes they will find a permanent home for this and keep the collection intact. Air India booking offices throughout the world were decorated with the finest Indian art and artifacts. One can fairly say that no airline in the world had such a beautiful and tastefully done up office anywhere. We'll again go back to a 1-minute clip from the film to look at their booking offices in Paris and New York. Here's another view of their New York office. And this wasn't just Paris or New York. Every office of Air India all over the world was tastefully decorated. Here we can see their Zurich office with a mural by Bendre. This is their Osaka office with Achrekar's mural up, bas relief on the wall right and facing us. We have here the Sydney office with the Shanti Dave mural. This is Frankfurt, again another Shanti Dave, and one more by Dave at Rome. So there's the quality, the taste, the way they depicted Indianness, the way they were able to carry India all over the world is something that is absolutely unparalleled. Despite all the creativity and freedom of expression, one thing remained sacrosanct: the design of the Maharajah. There were very strict and tightly controlled rules on how he could be depicted. And in 1974, they came up with an 85-page brand manual only on how the Maharajah was allowed to be depicted. Every artist in the Air India art studio had to practice and practice again until she could draw the Maharajah in freehand perfectly. Some became so adept they could do this blindfolded. Unfortunately, all this has been violated over the last 25-30 years. Now each artist has her own idea of who the Maharajah is and can be depicted. There is no consistency whatsoever. So here I'm just showing you one page from the 1974 brand manual, that little Maharajah statue that you see on the top right-hand corner of my presentation, all the technical specifications and dimensions by which he had to be manufactured. Air India celebrated its golden anniversary in 1998. Mr. Tata, who was no longer associated with the airline for over 20 years already, was invited as chief guest. They wanted to gift him and other special guests something memorable. So Air India's Vienna office contacted Swarovski and ordered 50 replica statues of the Maharaja made out of Swarovski crystal. It is believed that only 25 could be delivered, and we have an image here of the statue and the box in which it was packed. When the airline started, smoking on board was permitted, and Air India would provide attractive matchboxes, matchbooks, butane lighters, as well as a fine selection of cigarettes to passengers. Over the years, there was increasing awareness of the damage tobacco caused, and smoking on board was forbidden. Always moving with the times, Air India came up with this delightful poster spreading anti-smoking awareness. In the same vein, shikar was at one time considered a royal sport. Bobby Kuka himself was an avid shikari. Our Maharajah could not be left behind. So we have a travel poster and the cover of an airline timetable depicting our Maharajah on scenes from a royal hunt. Later, Kuka himself gave up shikar and played an active role in preserving wildlife. He became president of World Wildlife Fund India, and Air India produced a series of posters promoting conservation of wildlife. Here we have images of two of them, with our Maharaja doing his bit to promote wildlife conservation. The Air India calendar was one of the most sought after gifts from the airline and would adorn many a wall in offices and homes throughout the world, from 60s all the way to the 1980s. The entire process of producing a calendar took 1 year, and it involved a team of experts from the art studio. My own favorites are the 1964 and 1970 calendars. Here we see some sheets from the 1964 calendar. It has a selection of 12 of their best travel posters, showing the unique wit and creativity that went into the design of each of these posters. Another very special calendar was in 1970. This is in black and white and featured many of the airline's air hostesses. This again is a much in demand calendar, and even today I find people just look at it and appreciate the class of photography that has gone in here. Due to severe foreign exchange crisis, the Reserve Bank of India introduced the dreaded P form. In order to even buy an air ticket for foreign travel, for foreign exchange to spend on your visit, you needed permission from the RBI, and this was obtained by applying in Form P. The measure resulted in a sharp drop in overseas travel, and Air India suffered a lot. The airline came up with several interesting hoardings, which I will show you here, to highlight the woes of the travelers. This one is a take on My Fair Lady, 1965, with Audrey Hepburn as Eliza Doolittle. Here's another one. We have the Maharaja waiting anxiously at the staircase of his aircraft, while passengers await blessings in the form of foreign exchange from the RBI to travel abroad. This one is a take on the slogan of an American innerwear company, Maidenform, that was the rage in the 1960s. So while some of these were tolerated, there was one which finally got the government's goat. So we'll hear this story in the words of Kuka himself, who wrote this in Signature magazine. He said, Morarji Desai didn't like me. He became prime minister and he got rid of me. He said, how can a government-owned airline make fun of the prime minister? Because Kuka had written this very offending piece on the P form. So this is a limerick composed by Kuka. Morarji bhai, you are the king. Dollars and Deutschmarks don't mean a thing. Morarji bhai, one favor we ask. Banish the P form and gladden our hearts. Kuka continues. Shortly after that, Mr. Tata rang up to offload me. He had to be sacked for this. And he asked me how I felt. And Kuka replied to Mr. Tata, they're getting rid of me now. It's your turn next. And true to that, in 1978, Mr. Tata was removed as chairman of the airline. And there are many stories as to why it happened. I don't think this is the forum to dwell on that. But I have saved the best for the last. This is where the story comes to an end. I, I hope you have enjoyed listening to these tales as much as I've enjoyed sharing them with you. You can also visit my website, or you could simply Google Air India Collector. You can see about 6,000 plus different Air India artifacts collected by me over the years. Most of the material used in today's presentation is from my collection and is well organized and catalogued on the website. I'd like to end by thanking Khaki Lab for inviting me to give this talk. Happy to answer any questions you have. A very special thanks to Vivek Mathai, Prasad Chauhan, and Dharamdev Maurya for their invaluable assistance in building this collection and preparing for this talk. Thank you and Jai Hind.
What an utterly delightful talk. Was literally, you didn't realize how time passed by. Before, and I know there's a lot of appreciation for your talk. Could you tell us a little bit about how you got into collecting this memorabilia, and a little bit about any stories of how you managed to find some of these things? So we're just putting the spotlight back on you rather than your collection now.
Sure. So I started off as a philatelist, collecting airmail flown by Air India. As I went into that, I got intrigued by this Maharajah chap and, all his antics and how the airline depicted him on various flight covers. So one thing, I guess, led to the other. I stumbled upon this whole thing. And then I realized how poorly documented this has been. It's very unfortunate, but there just does not seem to be any this part of it. The art collection of Air India is well documented, well researched, catalogued, everything. But the real creative stuff, the genius of the airline, was not documented. So I just felt a call to do that. Coming as to how I get all this stuff, I mean, literally from the Raddi paper wala all the way to auction houses like Christie's and Sotheby's. We have lots of ex-Air India employees, staff, passengers who've flown Air India who just reach out to me and give me stuff, and they say, it's lying with me. I don't know what to do with it. We'd like you to have it. So it's a variety of sources.
Any interesting anecdotes about some elements that you might have found or collected that you could share with us?
Well, I talked about the film already. I think that clearly is the treasure in the collection. And I just wish I could have shown it in, better video and audio quality. But that is, I believe, the only surviving copy. So it's really a pleasure to have it. We've also shown it at certain Air India functions and events, both the JRD Tata Trust event as well as the Air India event at the Nariman Point building. So that is something that's quite unique and rare. Even the Swarovski statue, only 25 were made. I have 2 of them in my collection. I have a couple of Dali ashtrays as well. So I think, but what I really find appealing is just the simplicity, the design, the sheer chutzpah and audacity. You take something like a beer coaster, 300 different designs produced by them. This is stuff you just use and throw away. A lot of people would not even take a second look at it. But the creativity that's got into it, it puts a smile on your face instantly. So that is really what means more to me than anything else.
Absolutely. And what a delight to have it all showcased so well, both in this talk and, of course, on your site, which I think we must go and see. I'll run a little bit through the comments that we have here. Mostly it is a lot of admiration. I think everyone was spellbound through the talk, and there are really not that many questions, but deep appreciation. Adil says that he's been fortunate to work in the Air India engineering department from August 89 till 23 Feb. And he's worked on a variety of aircraft from 707, 747s and the Airbuses and 777 and Lockheed. Of course, Vivek has congratulated you for a wonderful talk, and as have Sai and Sunita and Arvind Modi. and Namrata, Shailesh. Somesh says that I think that you can make a movie on this. Um, Chaitanya, Varun all enjoyed it. Adil says that he has a photograph of the reenactment of the 30th anniversary of the first flight from Karachi to Bombay, which JRD had sent to someone as a New Year greeting card, signed by himself and his wife Thelma. Vijay Kulkarni says that he's a aviation enthusiast and would like to meet and exchange views with you. He's got die-cast models of Malabar Princess, Konark, etc. Commander Mohanarayan says that, like good wine, you just keep getting better, and I don't think I'll stop smiling for some more days. Shailesh says that he's been fortunate to work for 34 years in this iconic airline. Arun Swaminathan says, thank you so much, brilliant. His late Srini would have loved your talk as he was a navigator on the L749s and on Malabar Princess and retired when they were phased out, 707s. His daughter Geeta was an air hostess for 707s. So, merci beaucoup. SK says that it was an enlightening talk, and any chance of the original cement plane model in the Santa Cruz Garden being done by Air India. The new model is a poor replica of the original one, just like the status of Air India. Any idea about this model? The
No,
simple plane
I
model
agree
in the
with that.
Coast Guard.
Yeah, I agree with that comment entirely. The Boeing 707 that was built earlier was absolutely amazing. I remember as children, kids, we would go there and play around and slide in and out of the aircraft. But over time, I guess that got damaged, and what they've built now is terrible.
It's a rather clownish thing, whereas I think that was such a landmark, iconic, both for people in the city and those who visited from outside. Um, Yeah, so Vijay says that he has two Maharajah statues on display in his home showcase. So I think everyone's quite delighted with that soft, fuzzy feeling you get with stuff that you've seen over the last few, sort of decades and things that we associate with our airline. There aren't really any more questions. So I am going to thank you so much for this talk today and for this nice, happy smile that you've left on everyone's face today. Thank you so much, Piyush, for this evening. And thank you, everyone, for turning up this Saturday evening. And see you next Saturday. And of course, see you at the Kalagura Art Festival in Khaki Lab as well.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.